as humans, purpose is one of the key drivers of outcomes, of success, of fulfillment, frankly, even of happiness. So aligning those, with your employees, with your other stakeholders, frankly, even with your investors, is one of the factors I think that drives the most successful companies, frankly. And if you can attract the right kind of employees, they'll, as long as they're aligned with the overall purpose and mission, it is absolutely magical.
They say it's lonely at the top. They're right. But you don't have to scale your company alone. Welcome to the Scaling CEO. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. On this podcast, I sit down with top performing CEOs to uncover the hidden patterns and frameworks behind their success so you can avoid common pitfalls and accelerate your company's growth. Now, on to the show. Today's guest is one of the key architects behind the explosive growth of the modern tech ecosystem. Avanish Sahai is the executive who the biggest names in the industry, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and Google, trusted to build and scale their world-class partner platforms. He was in the driver's seat of the Salesforce AppExchange, growing it to over 2,000 apps and 2 million installs. At Google Cloud and ServiceNow, he revamped their go-to-market programs and partner ecosystems to drive massive growth. Today, Avanish has a career as a board member at companies like HubSpot and Birdie AI. He's an investor and advisor to a host of high-growth companies. He's also a fellow at the Stanford Center on Longevity. He's the expert on scaling through leverage. Avanish, it's an honor to have you on the show.
Glenn, so great to see you, and thank you for that really, really kind introduction, and delighted to be here.
You're quite welcome. You built scaling machines at all the big companies we talked about. You've seen how this plays out. If you could go back to the start, what is the one scaling insight about building ecosystems and leverages, not just direct sales, that would have saved you the most time and energy from the perspective of a CEO?
Glenn, first of all, I think it's not just me. It was a team, and I think that's probably the most important first lesson is you got to have the right team in the right time in the right place, right? So that I think is baseline. But I think when I look back, the key insight or the key lesson across all those and others where I've been advising and so on is you've got to have alignment. Building an ecosystem is not a siloed activity. If you don't align a core strategy with product, with marketing, with sales, with customer success, it doesn't work, right? So that to me is one of the biggest things is you have to have that alignment because if anybody tries to do this kind of in a silo or in somewhat isolation from the other functions, it's either going to underperform or it's not going to perform at all. So to me, that probably is the biggest lesson.
I love that. And from your seat as a board member and advisor to so many different companies, you see patterns. So what is the single biggest blind spot you see CEOs have when their company hits that awkward adolescent stage of growth?
Yeah, I think again, I'm biased towards this notion of, platforms and ecosystems. I think one of the key patterns that lead to, less than ideal success is when someone thinks that they can do it all.
Mm,
Um, we don't have, yes, given infinite resources and infinite time, we can and we should do it all. But that's not how it works. And you get to certain thresholds or milestones where frankly your customer, most importantly, is going to push you and they want a more complete solution. They want maybe an industry expert or a process expert. And you as a CEO, as a C-suite team, have to look, have to be self-aware, look through your own ranks and figure out, can you really do it all? And usually the answer is no. And by the way, that's how you get leverage, right? As you build the partnerships, you build the ecosystems, and you have to be somewhat surgical about it and say, where do I need help? Where do I do not want to scale? and therefore my partners can help me bring particular technical or business process or delivery or other skills to the table.
So you're talking about from a whole product perspective, can we deliver what the customer is really asking for in a time frame that's reasonable? And the answer is generally no. We don't have infinite capital, we don't have infinite time. And by leveraging partners, we can create that whole product that our customers are really asking for.
Yeah, and I think whole product is one very good way to describe it. I think also, frankly, customers in whichever part of the organization, they're looking to solve a problem, and therefore they need a solution. And that
Right.
solution can be a combination of things, right? Could be product, could be technology, could be again process redesign, could be a managed service model. Hey, I don't want to deal with this. Take this off my plate. Give me the whole thing. And we built relationships with some very large providers who would do that. So it's really trying to understand what is the customer really trying to solve for.
Right.
And you said it right. I mean, it is a combination of cost and speed and expertise with typically different priorities, but that kind of is what the customer is asking for.
It's interesting. I was talking to one of my CEOs about their go to market approach, and he was sharing that we tend to think as a software company, in this case, he's a software company CEO, that we think about product. And he said, no, actually, our customers think about solution. They
Yeah.
think about just get this problem solved for me. And a particular dilemma they have is that they believe they're going to have to add professional services to deliver the product. And the board doesn't like that. Certainly not within the company because that impacts margin and scalability. And so he's moving toward a partner led approach in order to deliver that full solution.
Yeah, so honestly, Glenn, there is as so many other things, there's a bit of a pendulum swing on that as well, right? Which is when I was at Salesforce is when we started doing work with this is 2009, 2010. When we first started thinking exactly to that point, hey, building a large professional services organization, it's dilutive to margin, a 20-25% margin versus an 80% margin. And software, you need to build an army of consultants, and that doesn't make sense, right? The street doesn't usually like that. So that's when we started engaging with the big GSIs, global system integrators, with boutique firms, et cetera, in a more systematic, scalable fashion. Now you look today, 2025, frankly, we're kind of back in time. And this notion of forward deployed engineers,
Right.
which has so many different names over the years, but companies like Palantir and Sierra and others are using that model, which is in essence professional services.
That's right.
But I think the difference is the economic analysis, I would say, still is the same, right? You are putting somewhat high price resources in your customer, and therefore the margin is going to be lower. The difference, I think, is right now it's being done to accelerate deployment, right? One. Two, and probably the most important point, is for the company itself to learn, right? How is my product faring inside the customer environment? What are the integration points I need to figure out? What are the data and security and scalability challenges that once I put this in the hands of either a partner or maybe even the end customer, what are they going to have to deal with? So there's probably a happy medium somewhere, which
Hmm.
is not too much in one end or the other. You got to learn how to sell and deliver your product. So it is an interesting dilemma that you have to thread through pretty carefully as a CEO.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Let's shift topics a little bit. I want you to share a little bit about your experience as a Stanford fellow and the work you're doing there and tell us about how that applies to what a scaled CEO even looks like.
Yeah. So I've done a couple of things at Stanford recently, which were part of my kind of post retirement or rewirement, as we call it, phase. And the first one was something called the Stanford's Distinguished Careers Institute, DCI, which is an absolutely fabulous program. It's about 10 years, 10, 11 years old. And some of the other universities are doing that now too, which is how do you bring folks who are probably in this transition phase from career to post career, and they're trying to figure out, what is the impact they want to have in this latter, quarter or third of life. And it could be around philanthropy, could be around social impact, could be around topics of interest that you never had a chance to delve into doing your career. So I did that for about 2 years, and again, explored areas of my brain that have probably never been instigated or exercised, anywhere from public policy to sustainability and climate to things like justice. And these were things I was always very curious about. But frankly, in the tech career that you described earlier, didn't really have a chance to spend much time other than basic readings to go deeper. So that was between 2023 and earlier this year, 25. As part of that, one of the topics that kind of came up to me as one of my passion projects, if you would, in this phase was trying to understand what is going to be the future of work and the future
Mm,
of learning. We've got so many changes that have happened to the workforce in the last 30, 40, maybe 50 years, right? We've had a lot of outsourcing, we've had automation, we've had offshoring. Now, the biggest wave that's coming is, of course, AI.
mhm, mhm.
And AI is going to have a much more significant impact across functions, across geographies, across industries than probably anything we've seen in our lifetimes. It's not impacting a single function. It's not impacting, white collar versus blue collar work. It's impacting everybody. And so the question that we were posing was, how do we think about this? How do we frame this? And how do we think about it from the different perspectives of so many different stakeholders, employers, employees, future employees or currently students, government and policymakers, academic institutions, whether it's a 4-year college or large university or even training service providers. So that led to a second kind of fellowship at Stanford, which is with the Stanford Center on Longevity. And they're sponsoring a project that I'm pretty closely involved with, which is framing this and bringing together a coalition of representatives from those different categories and thinking more systematically. What is this going to take? How is it going to change? What do the next 20, 25, maybe even 30 years look like? So it's a fascinating way to open your mind, and you asked about the CEO impact. It's really looking, stepping away from your day to day a little bit and trying to figure out the forest for the trees and what
Right.
is the second, third level impact of what we do and how do we think about it? How we think about it from the impact on society and so on. It's fascinating.
It sounds incredible. Um, I love both of the topics that you're covering, and what I try to do in my work is no matter where I'm learning something or what category of topic I'm learning something, I want to share that
Yeah.
with my CEOs. That's part of the reason why, frankly, I'm interviewing you today, because I want people to hear about some of these topics. Because while a CEO has their head down executing, part of my job is to pull them back every once in a while and ask some of the bigger questions about what are we really trying to accomplish here. And one of the areas where it really applies is in motivating employees. I talk a lot about, and you used this word earlier, purpose. If we can create a purpose for the existence of the company, that is a massive motivator for the employees who you want them to wake up early in the morning saying, I'm excited to work here, not just because I have stock options or because the company's growing fast, but because I'm having an impact that's meaningful to me. And it's fantastic to hear the work you're doing to bring that all together. And that's what I want CEOs to walk away with is that there is a purpose to what we're doing that is bigger than what we need to report to the board on in the next board meeting.
Yeah, I think, Glenn, you're absolutely right. And it is something that sometimes gets lost in the quarterly objectives and the OKRs and MBOs and so on. And frankly, as humans, purpose is one of the key drivers of outcomes, of success, of fulfillment, frankly, even of happiness. So aligning those, with your employees, with your other stakeholders, frankly, even with your investors, is one of the factors I think that drives the most successful companies, frankly. And if you can attract the right kind of employees, they know there are going to be ups and downs. But as long as they're aligned with the overall purpose and mission, not just the letters you put on a slide, but really, is it real? Is it coming from the founders, and are they living to it? It
That's
it's
right.
it's pretty magical. It is absolutely magical.
One of my CEOs was struggling with hiring AI engineers, uh, and he's a medium-sized company, but he's not running a big company. And he said, "I cannot compete with the Mag 7 in trying to get my AI engineers." So we worked together to create a story around a purpose for what this company was
Mm.
doing. And we realized only a small percentage of the AI engineer population out there is going to find that story interesting and compelling. But when we do have a chance to share that story, then we're able to hire those AI engineers, not because we're going to pay them more, because we're not, but because they're going to be motivated by what the company is doing. Specifically, that thing is going to be interesting to that AI engineer. So purpose is a really big part of that.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear an example like that, Glenn, because it takes fortitude to get to that conclusion and say, hey, I got to find the right people, and it's going to take longer. There may be a few needles in the haystack, but once I find them, the frankly the payback, not in a financial sense, but in kind of the outcome, the passion, the energy is
Commitment.
is absolutely fantastic. So that's a great story.
So, on our last topic, you already alluded to AI, and I talk a lot with my CEOs about AI, but you've been building platforms, and now AI is becoming the new foundational layer. How does that shift the playbook for a scaling business? How should a CEO think differently about building a partner ecosystem if AI is the core infrastructure?
Yeah, I think that is a topic du jour among a lot of us. I'm going to argue that the both the definition of a platform and the description of the ecosystem is changing, if not has already changed, very, very dramatically with the advent of AI, right? The
Oh,
traditional
good.
ways of going to market with a services partner or, making an integration happen, those things are up for grabs, right? When you start thinking about MCP or agent to agent in the case of Google and so on, how that gets done, who maintains it, all the trials and tribulations of the past, arguably they could go out the door, or they could get substantially simplified at a technical level, right? Two, when you start thinking about a go to market, I think the expertise that a customer is going to want is not necessarily the bits and the bytes and the integration and kind of the mechanical stuff. They need to think about this from a change management perspective, right? I would argue the biggest change, or the biggest challenge that AI projects are having or going to have, there's hallucination issues, there's data quality issues. Those are all, again, I'm pretty confident that with time those get solved. I think the biggest issue is the people. It's the
Mhm.
change management. It's the reskilling and retraining, going back to that point about the future of work and the future of education. So now your ecosystem has to deliver that, right? Where are we going to start? What's the impact to my team, whether in customer support, for example? It's one of the first areas that's being dramatically impacted.
Sure.
What do I do if I have, 20, 30, 40% extra capacity? Am I going to repurpose them? Am I going to retrain them? Am I going to lay them off? What's the change that starts to happen within my organization? And that applies, frankly, to engineering. We were seeing a lot of examples where C-level executives were saying, "Hey, I didn't hire as many engineers as I thought because I'm using, Copilots or Claude code and whatnot, and it's driving, greater productivity and improvement." Well, you start having really challenging questions that have to be addressed, and it's much more in the realm of people and change management than I think it is necessarily in the realm of technology. So it is a fascinating question. I think a lot of us are going to be grappling with for the next few years, or even even sooner than that.
Yes, and change management is fundamentally harder than anyone who's done it believes it is when they first enter that realm.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Avnish, we are done today, and I really, really appreciate you sharing some wise input for us all. And I hope CEOs are going to learn a lot from your comments. How can people reach you should they want to reach out?
Well, LinkedIn is the platform of choice. So find me on LinkedIn, and I'm always happy to connect and reach out. But really, thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. All right, thank you. That's a wrap for today's episode of The Scaling CEO. If you found this valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with a fellow CEO who could benefit. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us a quick rating as it really helps more people find the show. I'm Glenn Gow, the CEO Success Coach. See you next time for more proven strategies to grow your business and leadership.